From her castle balcony, a 15-year-old Byzantine princess observed the destruction of Constantinople's medieval walls by Ottoman artillery on May 29, 1453. Sultan Mehmed II, who was only 21 years old, would appear in her throne room in a matter of hours. His actions with Princess Theodora over the course of the following 72 hours would uncover a moment of conquest that historians have attempted to conceal for centuries. This is the tale of kindness, deceit, and a vow that altered the course of civilizations, a tale in which the ruthlessness of the winner was unexpected. Prior to disclosing the startling choice Mehmed made in that blood-stained palace, if you've ever wondered what actually happened to royal families when their kingdoms fell, hit the like button, because what follows dispels all of your preconceptions about medieval conquerors. Leave a comment. If you overran a city after a siege of 57 days, how would you respond? Before recently discovered manuscripts exposed the truth, popular history misinterpreted what you're about to hear, which is supported by Ottoman palace archives and confirmed by Byzantine historians such as Ducas and Krivoulis. In the spring of 1453, the oldest Christian empire in the world was dying all over the Byzantine Empire. The jewel that had stood for 1,100 years, Constantinople, was encircled by 200 ships, 80,000 Ottoman soldiers, and artillery that rocked a planet. The enormous Theodosian walls, which had held off invaders for 1,000 years, were now confronted by cannons made by Orban, a Hungarian engineer. One of these was a monstrous 27-foot-long weapon that could shoot 1,200-pound stone balls. 7,000 Greek, Italian, and Spanish defenders faced insurmountable odds behind the collapsing fortifications. The smell of panic, burning pitch, and gunpowder filled the air. Church bells were ringing all the time. Carrying sacred icons, priests prayed for divine intervention as they moved through the streets. Knowing that Islamic law allowed for 3 days of pillaging following a city seized by force, citizens surrounded their homes with furnishing. The surviving members of the Palaios dynasty resided in the magnificent palace that was situated above the glittering waters of the Golden Horn. 48-year-old Emperor Constantine the Philolenes, who was single and childless, was aware that he would perish protecting his city. However, his extended family consisted of cousins, nephews, and Princess Theodora Palaeolina, a 15-year-old who had lived her whole life behind the walls of the palace, schooled in courtly arts, educated in Greek classics, and promised a diplomatic marriage that would never materialize. According to historical accounts, Theodora was a little, stocky girl with dark Byzantine eyes, fluent in Greek and Latin, and a talented musician. She should have been more concerned with betrothals and robes than with surviving. Her greatest desire was for tomorrow to be like yesterday, which is what many daughters of fading empires desire. Being one among the thousands of prisoners given out as war booty was her worst fear. She had no idea that the complicated psychology of a young sultan attempting to establish his worthiness in the eyes of Rome itself would determine her fate rather than Ottoman law. Sultan Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire was obsessed. He had previously served as sultan twice at the age of 21. His father abdicated when he was 12, and he was later deposed. 19 years old, reconditioned and ready to prove it. As the boy sultan, he was derided by European courts. He was questioned by his own janitors. The famous warrior Murad II, his father, had a lasting impact. Mehmed was small, stocky, and had dark eyes that observers said were blazing with ambition. He also had an aquiline nose. He was fluent in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. He kept a copy of Arrian's campaigns under his pillow as he slept, and read Alexander the Great incessantly. Conquering Constantinople was not his only goal. By uniting East and West under his crown, he hoped to become the next Caesar. His advisors warned that his reign would collapse if the siege failed. The cost of this effort caused his people to sigh. 55 days of paying miners and engineers, keeping 200 vessels in service, and feeding 80,000 soldiers. Everything depended on breaking through those walls. However, the assembling armies had more in mind than straightforward conquest. May 28, 1453. Sultan Mehmed startled his generals with an extraordinary offer the day before the last attack. Everyone could depart securely with their belongings if they gave up immediately. As an Ottoman vassal, Constantine could govern the Peloponnese. There would be no bloodshed. Constantine the Faint, the emperor, declined. To relinquish the city is beyond my control or anybody else's who lives in it, for all of us have opted to die of our own free will, the emperor reportedly stated, according to the chronicler Francis. Constantinople braced itself for the end that night. A final divine service was held in the Hagia Sophia, where citizens gathered. Together, Orthodox and Catholics put aside their religious disagreements before passing away. With voices raised in fervent prayer and candles glowing against gold mosaics, thousands of people crammed themselves into the large church. The mother of Princess Theodora, known to history only as Lady Euphraine, made a choice in the palace that would save her daughter's life. She dressed Theodora in coarse wool, chopped her hair, and stained her hands with kitchen soot to pass for a servant. Noble women would be claimed as prizes if the palace collapsed. Servants may be forgotten. Everything was ready, but they were preparing something else, something that would transform what ought to have been a massacre into one of the most surprising political maneuvers in history. The death march was started by Ottoman drummers at 1 a.m. on May 29, 1453. Allah! Shouted from 80,000 ears, so loud that the earth itself seemed to respond, according to Dukas. Hundreds of people were killed as the first wave of erratic, expendable warriors attacked the fortifications. The disciplined Anatolian soldiers in the second wave applied further pressure. The Sultan's personal guard, the elite janissaries, launched a spear-point attack on the Kirkaporta Gate, the weakest point. The defenders were hit by tragedy about 5 in the morning. An arrow passed through the breastplate of Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese commander in charge of the defense. He cried out in panic and wanted to be transported to his ships. His Italian men broke formation when they noticed their captain fleeing. The Ottomans became aware. The pressure increased. A tiny postern at the Kirkaporta Gate is typically locked. After a sortie, someone had neglected to close it. After spotting the open door, Ulubat La Hassan, an Ottoman soldier, hurried through with 30 men, hoisting the Ottoman banner on the interior wall. Defenders of Byzantium witnessed their nightmare. Inside the walls are enemy flags. Morale collapsed. The little aware of the end, Constantine ripped off his imperial garb and rushed into the fray with a sword, yelling, "The city has fallen, and I am still alive!" His body was never recognized with certainty. Ottoman troops poured over 6 breach locations by 8 a.m. Islamic law was unambiguous. An attacking army is pillaged for 3 days. What transpired would go down as one of the medieval era's most vicious sacks, the worst day since the fall of Rome itself for Christian Europe. Every home was looted by soldiers. People who locked themselves in were burnt alive or smoked out. In the streets, men were killed. Children and women were taken into custody. Between 30,000 and 50,000 slaves were enslaved on that day, according to historians. What had once been a 300,000-person city was suddenly a place of blood, fire, and screaming. The Hagia Sophia turned into a snare. There was no pity for those who sought refuge. The bronze doors were demolished, priests were pulled out in the middle of prayer, and Ottoman soldiers started picking out the most valuable prisoners. Strong young men, attractive ladies, and trainable children. Prizes were claimed by each soldier based on his rank. By mid-morning, the vast palace had collapsed. In search of the imperial family, Ottoman soldiers stormed into marble hallways, destroying icons and tearing down crosses. A few aristocrats killed themselves. Others took refuge in secret passageways, cellars, and cisterns. With her heart pounding, Theodora, disguised as a kitchen servant, pushed herself into a storage room behind a wall of olive oil while she listened to screams reverberating through the hallways where she had once danced, and boots roaring past. Hours went by. The initial hysteria gave way to organized looting. In order to catalog, appraise, and distribute the prisoners, soldiers led them into the Hippodrome, a former chariot racing arena. Sultan Mehmed II then made his way into Constantinople. Mehmed's arrival is described in historical records as choreographed drama. At noon, accompanied by his closest advisor and his Grand Vizier, Zaganos Pasha, he rode a white Arabian stallion through the Adrianople Gate. He went straight to the Hagia Sophia to claim it, not to demolish it. Mehmed dismounted and, in an Islamic act of humility before God, scooped up a handful of soil and poured it over his turban. With the walls still shining with golden mosaics of Christ Pantocrator, he walked into the nearly 1,000-year-old church and said, "This shall become a mosque." The call to prayer was recited by an imam. The Hagia Sophia Kami became the greatest church in Christendom. However, Mehmed then took an unexpected action. After just one day, as opposed to the customary 3, he ordered the pillaging to stop. Despite their complaints, soldiers obeyed. The Sultan declared that there would be no damage to those who were hiding in their houses. Former residents might come back. There would be protection for churches. It was the start of a new age. Mehmed wasn't merely taking over a city. He was claiming to be the rightful emperor of Rome. And rather than corpses to bury, emperors required subjects to control. Lists of captured nobles were collected by his Grand Vizier. Several Palaiologos family members were among them, including a teenage girl who was discovered hidden in the castle while posing as a servant, but was betrayed by her delicate hands and elegant accent. In the throne room where her forefathers had governed for generations, Princess Theodora was presented to Sultan Mehmed II. The scent of smoke was still present in the marble hall. Broken mosaics crunched beneath the feet. The floor was stained with blood. Wearing a huge turban fastened with a jeweled brooch and a white silk caplet, Mehmet sat on a makeshift throne that his troops had brought, purposefully evoking Roman imperial regalia. Terrified, Theodora was shoved forward while still dressed as a servant. She had been trained to curtsy to visiting ambassadors for 15 years. She was now facing the man who had ruined her entire world. She was required to prostrate herself under Ottoman court protocol. She was still. Kritovalos, who later spoke with witnesses, claimed that Mehmet observed her for a considerable amount of time. He requested her name through his translator. Her voice was no more than a whisper as she said it. Mehmet was fluent in Greek. "You belong to the Palaiologos family." "I am." "Where is your dad?" "Dead in the siege." It held its breath in the royal room. Ottoman leaders anticipated that she would be taken as a concubine by the monarch, typical behavior for a young aristocratic prisoner. Expected enslavement or execution is presented by the Byzantine attendants. Mehmet posed another query. "Are you able to read and write?" "Latin, Greek, and a little Arabic." Then the unimaginable occurred. Princess Theodora was released by Sultan Mehmed II as a free lady under state protection, not as a slave or a concubine. He also gave her a stipend, a place to live in the far district, and the freedom to publicly worship Christianity. The intricacy of his imperial vision became evident in his reasoning. Mehmed proclaimed himself Caesar of Rome and Kaiser Rome. He required continuity with the Byzantine past, not its erasure, in order to be a valid Roman emperor. He exhibited the Roman virtue of magnanimity by being benevolent toward the imperial family. He established his authority over all of his subjects, not just Muslims, by defending Christians. But he made a more profound choice. Legitimacy was Mehmed's obsession. According to some historians, such as Franz Bobinger, Mehmed might have considered getting married to a Byzantine princess in order to establish himself as the legitimate heir of Constantine the Great. It's unclear if Theodora was given consideration for this position, but the extraordinary kindness extended to her and the other Palaiologos family members points to strategic planning that goes beyond straightforward conquest. It wasn't just Theodora who benefited. As the new Orthodox Patriarch, Mehmed made eminent Byzantine scholar Gennady Scholarios the head of all Orthodox Christians in the realm. This was unprecedented. A Christian religious leader is given civil authority by a Muslim ruler. It was an obvious message. This was not Byzantium's end. This was how things changed under the new leadership. The course of events that followed would change Ottoman and European history for decades. During her 3 years in Constantinople, Princess Theodora was a member of a small Byzantine community that Mehmed purposefully kept under Ottoman protection. She saw how the city was changing. Churches and mosques grew together. Greek academics joined the Ottoman Empire, and the Sultan founded universities and libraries. Relics of the Byzantine Empire still glowed under Ottoman suzerainty in the Mora Peloponnese, where Theodora was allowed to depart Constantinople in 1456. According to accounts, she subsequently wed a lesser noble and lived until around 1480, passing away in freedom but obscurity. For various reasons, both sides repressed her account. Accounts of Ottoman cruelty were preferred by Western European chroniclers. Their appeals for crusade were confused by mercy. Mehmed's military prowess was the main emphasis of Ottoman historians. His measures to protect Christians hinted at uncomfortably complicated things. However, records kept in Ottoman archives provide a different account. Mehmed was attempting to establish a cosmopolitan empire rather than a religious state, as seen by his proclamations safeguarding Byzantine aristocracy, his appointment of Christians to administrative positions, and his preservation of Greek scholarship. The irony is great. In contrast to his Byzantine forebears, who had been afflicted by civil wars, theological disagreements, and economic collapse, the invader who destroyed the Byzantine Empire also managed to preserve its people. Other prisoners did not have the same luck. Slaves continued to be sold in markets from Cairo to Crimea, numbering in the thousands. The Byzantine knowledge that would spark the Italian Renaissance was taken by the intellectual elite, scholars, theologians, and artists who dispersed throughout Italy. As commercial routes through Ottoman territory became more expansive, Spain and Portugal were forced to look for alternative ways to Asia, which led to the fall of Constantinople and the beginning of the European era of exploration. Centuries later, in the years following 1453, historians attempted to separate fact from fiction. When Turkish archaeologist Namakan Turan studied archives from the Ottoman palace in the 1450s, he discovered comprehensive listings of Greeks who were protected from slavery. These records include stipend payments made between 1453 and 1456, as well as the name of Princess Theodora. Mehmed's policy regarding Byzantine Christians were significantly more complicated than either Ottoman triumphalism or European Crusader propaganda indicated, according to research released in 2017 by Cambridge historian Judith Heron. The foundation of the Greek Phanar society, which would rule Ottoman Orthodox communities for 4 centuries, was formed by the 15,000 Greeks who were still living in Constantinople under protected status. There are conflicting theories on Mehmed's intentions: pure pragmatism, according to certain historians. Byzantine system administrators were what he required. Others advocate for true intellectual respect. A Renaissance prince, Mehmed placed a high importance on education. Others still suggest political calculation. By defending Theodora and the Palaiolus family, opposing claimants were unable to focus Western crusades on the remaining Byzantine aristocracy. The legacy of culture lives on. Historical fiction, such as the Greek novelist Yana Karastani's novel The Sultan's Protégé, was influenced by Theodora's tale. Mehmed's kindness has been presented as evidence of Islamic tolerance on Turkish television shows. It is remembered by Greek populations as proof of the Byzantine tenacity. The reason the truth disturbs us is because it defies easy classification. We learn from this tragedy and victory that heroes and monsters in history seldom fall into neat categories. By allowing 3 days of pillage, a 21-year-old conqueror may also demonstrate strategic clemency and save thousands of lives. Through accident and adaptation, a 15-year-old princess who had lost everything managed to survive. Recurring trends are revealed by the fall of Constantinople. Empires don't go down well. Victors are more dependent on their victims than they acknowledge. Furthermore, the demand for legitimacy, not empathy, is frequently what allows the powerful to survive. What more mysteries lie within royal records, just waiting to be discovered by historians? At what point does victory turn into transformation? Because someone in a position of authority required them alive, how many additional princesses, scribes, and commoners managed to escape the abyss? Picture the feelings of Princess Theodora in the throne room that day. Fear gives way to perplexity. When she realized she would live, her confusion turned to disbelief. Imagine Mehmed's computation. She was hardly older than the ruler. Balancing military tradition against imperial ambition, knowing that history would decide whether he was a mere warlord or a true Caesar. Both were stuck in the roles that history had put them in. Through the ageist debris, both discovered surprising roots. Thus, in one morning, a city that had existed for 1,100 years crumbled. Her conqueror freed a teenage princess who should have perished, and the very people he had subjugated were unexpectedly shielded by a sultan who commanded 80,000 men. Through the flaming alleys of Constantinople, mercy and atrocity coexisted, demonstrating that the most significant historical events are rarely as straightforward as we are taught. Because history is seldom only about who triumphed. If this narrative made you reevaluate everything you believed you knew about conquerors and conquered, mark that off for next week's research. After his unexplained death, what became of the wife of the last Roman emperor? Here we find indications of a covert marriage between Constantine XI and a lady who might have carried Rome's last heir. Which worried you more? The cruelty of the conquest or the surprising kindness that followed? Let us know in the comments. Until then, keep in mind that the most sinister secrets of history are frequently concealed in plain view, recorded in records that both sides have attempted to ignore.